Undead Unluck is yet another Shonen Jump manga that's been hit with the anime stick. And if you plan on watching this series, you're in for a real treat, as this has one of the most unique concepts for a power system I've ever seen. However, this uniqueness can cause some confusion, and things are more fun when you know what's going on. So in this video, I'll be going over Undead Unluck's 3 power systems, how they interact with each other, and how mind-bending they really are when you think about it. Very minimal spoilers and me-onlys, do not worry. Consider this Undead Unluck 101. Just the very basics of the power system with examples that won't spoil anything in the plots. Pay attention, there'll be a test. Now, I say Undead Unluck technically has 3 power systems, but it technically has 2, with one of those 2 being divided into 2 very distinct facets built on one idea: rules. These are the Negators and the Umas. The second power system is the artifacts. The concept of rules is actually really simple, but as you make it into a power system and explore that, it gets much more complicated. Every facet of life has rules. People grow up, people get sick, people die, gravity is a thing, you can't see what you're looking at. Life is full of absolutes that you never really think about, yet in most cases they are things that must happen. These are the rules of reality. Simply the common sense of a normal human. With that in mind, let's start with Negators. Negators are a rather unique concept for a power system because they aren't really about having a power. Rather, being a Negator is about preventing something from happening. Negators are all identified by the rule they negate and the prefix on. It seems like at the moment they become Negators, they also gain an instinctive knowledge of what to call their ability. I can't think of any other reason why Fuuko calls her strokes of unluck that instead of just calling them bad luck. As an example, look at our male MC, Andy. He is undead. That means he is exempt from the rule of death. In other anime, you would simply say he's immortal, but in this power system, it's more accurate to say that he just can't die. Negators don't so much have powers as they just reject what we call normal reality, though they can mold those rejections into power. And while Negator abilities are based on rules, they are also a result of the mindset of the Negator and how they understand their ability. And when that understanding changes, so does what they can do. For a completely hypothetical example, let's say there was a Negator called Unlearn, who negates the idea of learning. Their initial understanding may be based entirely on the kind of learning you do in school, so they may make someone incapable of learning anything in class. But if they change their understanding of what it means to learn from just learning from a teacher to learning from life, they could probably make their target incapable of retaining any memory of anything happening around them. To use a canon example, Andy considers aging to be an aspect of death, so he doesn't age. But if you didn't consider aging to be part of dying, you'd live forever. Knowing how long he's been undead, I shudder to imagine what he'd look like. In this way, abilities can change. However, you must change that ability with your own understanding. Those who try to get around their abilities via outside methods tend to have unfortunate ends. The only way to truly surpass yourself as a Negator is to understand the rules of your ability and learn to either expand them or take advantage of them. If a Negator dies, the ability will transfer to another human, but that transfer is facilitated in a way to make the recipient of the power suffer immensely at the moment they get it. See Fuuko accidentally killing her parents and 268 other people the day she got hers. Parents are a big casualty in the story, and anime as a whole. Negators come with 4 classifications, of which any of them can fall under 2. The first 2 classifications are self-targeting, that is, people who negate something about themselves, like Andy who is unable to die, and external targeting, like people who negate something other than themselves, like how Fuuko's unluck doesn't make her unlucky, just whoever touches her. Though that raises the question of if Fuuko's strokes of unluck can even hurt her. The next 2 categories are compulsory activation and voluntary activation. Compulsory types like Undead and Unluck activate regardless of their own desires. They can control its power, but they can't undo it. I find that this is more common because it causes more misery that way. Then there are the voluntary types, like Unchange, who has mastered her ability and does it on command. When it comes to Negator combat, the person who understands their ability has a huge advantage, but so does the person who can understand what the rules of their opponent's ability is. Going back to my unlearn example, if you want to beat him, you'll need to figure out exactly what triggers his unlearn and how to avoid it, as well as the possible range of his power, which might be difficult if you're in a state where you can't learn anything. The key to beating Unavoidable was being able to tell how his ability affects you and what he can't affect. Some negators can even negate your ability to go against their negating. For instance, a hypothetical negator on close might negate your ability to close your mouth, but they could also make it so that if you try to close your mouth with your hands, they won't move as long as that's what you want them to do. Another important thing to note is that negators aren't affected by the addition of umas and their memories aren't adjusted. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let's talk umas, or unidentified mysterious animals. Okay, if I was an uma, I'd be insulted at being called such a thing, especially considering what they are. As negators say no to a rule, it turns out those rules can respond. An uma is basically a living embodiment of a rule. They are pretty sentient and capable of holding opinions, desires, and making decisions, but they live by one idea: make humans suffer. It's an impulse they all share, but it can't be overcome. Generally, umas see themselves as higher than humans. The world is the way it is because of them, so they must be important. The negators they consider more of an insult. There are two types of umas: concept types and phenomenon types. We haven't gotten a lot of detail on what those terms mean though, just that concept types are favorites. And they do seem to be more powerful, or at least more complicated to take down, though a phenomenon type uma with an advantage over what the concept type does can still beat them. The important thing to note about umas is that you can't kill them mindlessly. An uma is the rule it manifests. If you kill it, it will cease to be, both now and in memory. If you kill, say, the rule of color and all records that colors ever existed will disappear, and no one will remember it was a thing. Though these changes don't seem to completely alter history in a way that will do things like change where people's current locations are. The changes in memories also do not affect any negators. The same thing happens when an uma is born, as it adds a rule that never existed before and adjusts the memories of everyone but negators to accommodate it. I actually go over an example of this in a previous video, and if you don't mind seeing more spoilers than what are currently in this video, I recommend you check it out. It's the moment that got me hooked on the series as a whole. There's also a stark difference in fighting a negator or an uma. Negators need to fulfill a requirement of some kind like physical contact or even seeing their target. But most uma are much freer on who their abilities can affect and when they can attack, with the majority of them having what is essentially an area-wide effect, with a much more diverse range of abilities as they grow across their phases. Umas start out as relatively weak football-sized cores, but as they grow into phase 1 and phase 2, they get much more dangerous and much more difficult to defeat. Umas traditionally only have 2 phases. It's also worth noting that umas are also susceptible to negator abilities. I can't go into much more detail about what exactly umas are because this video is meant to be safe for anime onlys, and almost everything else I can say about them is either a spoiler or something that you should see as it's revealed. Speaking of things I can't talk about, artifacts. I really can't talk about them, but all you need to know is that they are essentially powerful objects that grant all sorts of abilities, from generating wind blades to even bringing drawings to life. They provide useful weaponry for negators in their battles and have all sorts of fun and dangerous effects, with more powerful ones carrying a price to keep them from becoming overpowered. An example is the Kinto Un Cloud, which the more knowledgeable of you will recognize as Sun Wukong's flying cloud, and the less knowledgeable will recognize as the flying nimbus used by the Sun family in Dragon Ball. It requires that someone has a pure heart to ride it, though what that means is vague. Artifacts may seem like convenient tools, and they are, but they exist for a reason. The plot of this story goes places you definitely won't see coming if you haven't been spoiled. And with that, you've officially finished Undead Unluck 101. Time for a test. Go down into the comment section and make up a negator and what abilities they'd have. Go nuts! And tell me what you think of this power system and this video as a whole. Also, while you're down there, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. I have more Undead Unluck videos planned. Thank you, and good day.